no one listened to thrash in the 90s. So we weren't at all thinking that we were doing something commercial, successful.
Mm.
But then again, here's another thing I want to say about writing music from your tummy, from your gut, like more than your brain. Hate Song was the last song that we wrote for that album, and usually I find when you have a short amount of time and we just need one more song, and you let go of the tension and you just write. And if songs tend to write themselves, if it's a easy process, you just, this leads into this, and yeah, let's try this. That's when the songs, my experience, are the best songs, because if it needs to be emotional, I don't think they should be over thought.
Greetings, Legion. Welcome to episode 273 of Into the Necrosphere. This week, I'm joined by the legendary Patrik Jensen from The Haunted. He is also a member of Witchery, previously a member of Seance and Satanic Slaughter, an absolute man's man, and he was here to tell us all about the forthcoming Haunted record, Songs of Last Resort. That's going to be released on Century Media on May the 30th. In my opinion, the very strongest material that The Haunted have put out since One Kill Wonder, that was put out all the way back in 2003. We spoke about that record. We went back to the Seance days and covered a lot of ground there. It is a really fun conversation, and it's going to be coming your way very shortly. But before we get to that, to get you warmed up for the episode that lies ahead, I am not going to be playing unsanctioned filth this week, nor will I be delivering a premiere on the Sphere. But what I will be doing is to be playing another song off an album that has elicited much excitement, not only on Into the Necrosphere, but amongst the Legion. I speak, of course, of The Great Satan by Trivax, due for release through Osmos Productions, also on May the 30th. The Great Satan is now available to stream in full on Bandcamp, and many of you are already sending me feedback saying this is one of your favorite albums of the year. Just in case you've been sleeping on it, here's another reminder to etch the release date into your calendar. This is a track called Demon's Melancholia. Demons Melancholia by Trivax, taken from their new album, the absolutely fantastic record, The Great Satan, due for release officially through Osmos Productions on May the 30th. But you can check out the whole thing right now on Bandcamp because it's streaming on there. Link, as always, in the description to the podcast. If you happen to head over there and you buy yourself any music, then make sure that you let Cheyenne and the Trivax boys know who it was who sent you. Cheyenne, of course, is a fellow member of the Horsemen of the Podcasting Apocalypse. Who are the Horsemen of the Podcasting Apocalypse, I dare you ask? Well, if you're sick and tired of the Ethan Kleins, the Asan Pikers, the Logan Pauls, and other assorted trailer trash clogging up the podcast septic tank, the Horsemen of the Podcasting Apocalypse are here to give it a big old flush. In particular, if you love horror movies, you've got yourself amply covered on a Monday when Brandon Legion brings you another episode of Horror Wolf 666. On a Tuesday, yours truly de-wimpifies metal with extreme fucking prejudice right here on Into the Necrosphere. Remember, this coming weekend, I will be at Fortress Festival in Scarborough, so if you are nearby and you see me, come say hello. I am hosting 2 live podcasts, one with the almighty Necros Horns, the legendary black metal photographer and a very good friend of mine, also happens to be one of the most interesting men on the planet, and I'm also going to be speaking to Frank of Fen and Fellwarden. So make sure you're going to be there. There will be opportunity for you to ask some questions as well and interact with my guest. So looking forward to seeing you guys at Fortress, shaking a few hands, having a few beers. I want to try me some of those Gothic burgers I see bandied about the socials as well. So Gothic burger, you best not let me down. My standards when it comes to burgers and steaks, exceptionally high, as you know. Moving on with the Horseman scheduling on a Wednesday, we got your first double shot of the week. It starts with Everything Went Black, hosted by Mike Hill of the band Tombs. On a Wednesday, we also have Cheyenne of the band Trivax. As I mentioned, he gives you Iblis Manifestations. On a Thursday comes your second double shot. That double shot consists of Necromaniacs. That is a podcast that is certainly one of my personal favorites, and it's one where we get the return of Mike Hill, and he is joined by his co-hosts, the Outlaw Mike Scandardo and the Professor Jeff Kashid. They review old and new horror movies. This past week, they did Last Exit to Brooklyn. Always the perfect way to help set that viewing schedule for the remainder of the weekend. And it is a podcast that is one, like I said, I never miss, always super entertaining, always highly informative. Also on a Thursday, we've got the Sinister Minister, the Reverend Carl Hikara, giving you the first episode of Soul Knox. If you like the dark, the weird, the arcane, the esoteric, or any related subject matter, the Sinister Minister has you covered, and he returns for his second outing of the week every Sunday. So make sure you don't miss Soul Knox. Make sure you don't miss any of our podcasts. Subscribe, tell the world that you can go a different way. We won't charge you money for any of our content, and we certainly won't be enforcing any bullshit opinions on you. But if opinions are what you're after, then don't go anywhere when I'm done talking to Patrik Jensen of The Haunted, because a news rant, a fully throated news rant awaits. We are listening this week to brand new tracks by Blackbraid, Hexvessel, Sensanium, Unleashed, I think Deathgoat was one of the bands that we were listening to, and a bunch of others. I'm also going to be answering your questions. This week I covered top 5 Death Doom albums, 3 metal records I would like to remaster or remix, 1 band that fit into the specs of what is top notch, and 1 band that doesn't, that I like or dislike, and then 1 that I'm pretty confident is going to spark an intense amount of debate, possibly even a slight subscriber exodus, my top 5 most unpopular movie takes. That's coming up later in the podcast. Right now, though, sit back and buckle up as I welcome to Into the Necrosphere, making his debut at Mean Street Studios, Patrik Jensen of The Haunted. And I see you're, it looked almost, when I first came on, it looked like, for a split second, it looked like you had a dress shirt on. I was like, have you just come straight from the office to come and do this? Or
No, I actually have a Texas shirt on.
Ah, there we go. All right.
No, it's super cold here in Sweden. Spring has been. I mean, it's you do Celsius, right, in the UK?
Yeah.
So it's 7 outside. Feels like 3. I mean,
I'm just going to check mine. So it's 16 over here. But I mean, we've definitely had mornings, even though we're mid May now, where it's like 2, 3, and where my car's frozen over when I go to the gym. It is weird. I remember last year in July, I fucking switched the radiators on again, and I was like, "It's supposed to be summer." And I don't get cold very easily, but it's all over the place.
Yeah.
Now, I did mention to you this is very much a conversation, but I'm going to ask you a very obvious question to start with, because I just need to have, I think, the context for anybody that maybe hasn't heard you talk about it elsewhere. It has been a hot minute, as they say, between releases, and obviously we had this a little known event known as the COVID pandemic during that period. But why the delay between the new record coming out and the previous one, which I think that was 2017, yes, unless my memory fails me. So we're coming up to 8 years now. So why that gap?
So this is going to be a long answer. We never intended it to be this long. People might have, thought that we went on a break or something, but that was never the case. After 2017, I know Jonas was busy for a bit there. He did 2 At the Gates albums by himself. I did 2 Witchery albums actually, but so actually just the other day I was checking the folder that we have our stuff in, the shared folder on Dropbox, and it says album 2020 on it. So anyway, long story here. The Haunted has always been a rehearsing band. So we were rehearsing for way longer than any of our other Gothenburg contemporary bands. If we were not on tour, like after a week coming home, we'd be, if not every day, maybe every other day, we'd be there rehearsing. We treated it as a job. Mm. And that's also how I grew up. I put out 2 death metal albums in the 90s, and rehearsal room computers weren't a thing, so that's what I've been doing, sitting next to a 100-watt amplifier and just playing away. So I felt that after we changed members in 2012, no one lives in the same city. We even live in different countries. As Adrian lives in London, he moved to the UK in '99 to join Cradle. So rehearsing is really hard. So I wanted to get that feeling back into the Haunted, like a bit more. If our music is to appeal to emotions like aggression or something, it needs to have that raw feel to it, I felt. So I wanted to get something going, like writing music in a more organic way. So Adrian, we set up so Adrian could come over to the city where I live. I got a studio rented for 6 days, just him and me, just like when we started out. And then COVID hit. So no one could go anywhere. And then in 2021, when he finally came over, we had set everything up. We had everything, so I could sit in with him. So it was like a rehearsal space, but I had the controls, like an extension cord, so I could record things from in there. And we went home, going to start fresh. The following day, he comes down with a very bad case of tummy bug. I mean, very bad. And so he was on my couch. I went back to work. No reason to have time off to just look at him. After 3 days, he started to get better. Then, of course, I get it because it's a tummy bug. So I'm out for 3 days. So he has to go there and strip everything down and go home without one single minute being played. That was kind of put a flat tire on everything. Move forward to last year, actually. I work with making guitar plugins. So I lead the team of the guitar team. So like I get to choose what to do, what it should look like, what mics, what cabs, and what it should sound like. So last year we put out a high gain guitar plugin. Anglo Savage, and it was ready. It was, I think it was done by March or something. We put it out during the spring, but all of a sudden I noticed that I could play like I was in the rehearsal room. I'm the kind of guitar player that plays with the sound I hear. So if I sit with someone's gear, or I'll plug in whatever, and it sounds like Kaya's, it'll be stoner riffs coming out. And if it sounds like sin after sin freestyle, well, it'll be that kind of riffs that come out. So all of a sudden I could play like I was in the rehearsal space. So people say that the new album sounds like we've gone back to our roots. It's just that I never knew that I needed this tool to kind of get those haunted riffs out that I always were able to when we were a rehearsing band. So between March and end of the summer last year, I wrote 11 songs. And I started texting the guys. We have a messaging group, like, okay, so we're going to record this fall. And they were skeptical because it had been so long and it felt like a monstrous task, to get this album completed. But, I started showing the songs, and Ola's always been ready. He writes riffs every day because he showcases gear on his YouTube channel. Jonas was a bit harder to get started, but, we all got started. It turned out that I got to be the project leader for this recording because I knew I had 11 songs. We can do this. So found a studio owned by Oscar Nilsson at Bohus Studios in Gothenburg. I got to know him because through the Halo Effect, I play live with the Halo Effect. And we recorded there in November. And that's how the album came together. So I never knew that I needed this tool.
So those 11 songs that you mentioned, how many of them made it onto this record versus what was in that 2020 folder? Because 2020 would align to the rhythm that you guys were kind of following around that point, because it was roughly about every 3 years you put out a record. Yeah. So was there the makings of a full album in that 2020 folder? Did some of that make it onto the new record? What's kind of the split of the material?
I actually scratched all of it because it wasn't. I had to make do with the sound I had then. The songs were a bit less thrash on Exit Wounds and Strength in Numbers, and I thought it was just like you have your favorite bands, and then they grow older, and then they don't put out the most exciting material. So I thought that that's happening to me now. Riffs are drying up. That's life. I never knew that it was up to the sound I had. Because I always considered myself to have a pretty strong inner 16-year-old. I still get, revved up when I listen to Raining Blood or whatever. So, scratched all my old stuff, wrote new stuff. The only riff that's old is the first riff on the last song, Letters of Last Resort.
Yeah.
Yeah, that riff is from, I actually checked the date when I first did the bounce. It's 2008. So that idea has been around for a long time.
Wow. Yeah, and that goes all the way back to like Versus. I was about to say, off the top of my head, it was Versus, but yeah, that's a long way back. You do have form, or at least as a band, you guys have form for discarding ideas. You're not necessarily immediately on board with or excited about, or if you feel things have to go in a different direction. Because I recall reading something about a concept album that you had created in the run-up to One Kill Wonder that kind of got pushed to the wayside in order to make way for the album that ended up coming out. Do you keep any of the stuff that you delete? Is there a vault that has hundreds of haunted riffs and songs and stuff that at some point you could release?
I know Ola does, because he's a terribly stressed person because of his YouTube channel and his guitar brand and everything. So he doesn't have any short-term memory. So he bounces, he records everything, and he has a huge file of riffs, I'm sure. I don't remember about that concept album you're talking about, actually.
I need to try and find where I read that. I don't think I'm senile yet, so it's not. But I did read that that basically there was this idea for a concept album, and some of the songs came across like Shadow World and DOA, but ultimately the album ended up being a much more straightforward thrash album. Obviously, the one that we all know and love, which incidentally that is one of my favorite Haunted albums. I should also add.
Yeah.
So it may have been one of my late night trawls through AI, like, tell me more about this album. Like, what is stuff about this album I might not know? It's so interesting what you say about having that guitar sound get your creative juices flowing, because I often talk on the podcast about musicians and bands that have been in the game for a very long time, and I have an intense admiration for the veterans that are still able to be, creating and writing and delivering music at an exceptionally high level, when they're in their, mid to late 50s, and they've been around for a very, very long time. And I've always tried to unpack what exactly it is that distinguishes the guys, like, if I would give examples for my tastes, a Shane Embry, the guys from Testament, those bands, from other bands who I'm pretty sure you could probably imagine in your mind who I'm thinking about, but other bands who just, it doesn't really matter how hard they try, the magic is just gone. It just seems like it's either a loss of passion or a loss of motivation, but just the fire isn't there anymore. So hearing you say that, was it a conscious thing when you heard that plugin, when you heard that guitar sound, you were like there's something going on here, or how did it work for you?
I'm glad you mentioned Testament, because Eric Peterson is criminally overlooked. He's such a,
I agree.
Oh, what a guy, man. But I think I experienced this also because I have another band called Witchery, and we have an album called Witchery, and on that album we have several guests that do guest solos. So there's Andy LaRock, Kerry King, and Jim Durkin, and Gary Holt, among others. And most of these guys we sent the song to, and they sent the solos back. But Exodus, we actually got them when they were playing Gothenburg. So I got the Fredman studio, and I went and got Lee and Gary in the car and brought them up there, and just had them record a solo on the spot. And I could tell by the way Gary was playing that guy, he also, that's when I first thought of this expression. He looks like he's 16 years old when he's sitting there creating. There's just something about that. He's still excited. Like, yeah, let's go. He's like a racehorse that wants to be let out. And deeply impressed me. So I'm not at all comparing myself to Gary Holt, but I also feel that I'm still a fan of roller coasters. I still love that feeling in my tummy. So when I say that the Haunted play like emotional music, like aggressive music, if I feel that feeling like this makes me want to drive my car really fast, then I know I'm on the right track. So I guess the dopamine rush of the riff, if you never lose that, then you're able to write that kind of music. Other people, they find other interests. They start, fishing, or bet on horses, or I don't know. But maybe I'm just a one-track mind. I like playing metal guitar.
Well, whatever it is, I mean, we'll talk about the new album in more detail in a second. But I've been a fan since the first album came out. I remember reading articles about the band and about the first album and what it might sound like. They used to always do those in the studio previews and all that sort of stuff. And the band was getting attention in the magazines I read because of the connections that you guys had to other bands. I remember hearing Hate Song on one of those demo pods they had in the CD stores for the first time, and I was just like, holy fuck. And you guys widely are regarded to this day as one of the main bands, if not the main band, that rejuvenated thrash metal, or at the very least kick-started the sort of thrash revival that has just been picking up momentum over the course of the last 2 decades, and I would say especially in the last decade. So, you know, for me, it's so cool to hear you come back with a record like this, and it sounds so. The word I used when I heard the first single was, it sounds rejuvenated. It sounds vital, like it has a youthful energy to it, which is interestingly also in line with what you've just said.
Yeah. So I was thinking about a good answer here. Hate song. I've heard many times that people say that we were, the band that brought thrash back. I think that first album was great. It was, best newcomer of the year all over the place. We never set out to play thrash. It was just what I knew, and that mixed with the Belials, what they wrote. So that was what came out, and that has been our way of writing albums ever since. We've never sat down before with a spreadsheet or some, this is what we need to do. What comes out is where the band is, because I'm a big music fan myself. So when you meet your friends, you have a couple of beers, and then you talk about Black Sabbath Sabotage album compared to Volume 4 or something. The kind of talk you do if you're interested in music. And I like the concept of an album as like a time document where the band was at that point, and you can hear, they were on tour with this band before they recorded the album. So you can hear that kind of discussion. But with the first album, no one listened to thrash in the 90s. So we weren't at all thinking that we were doing something commercial successful. But then again, here's another thing I want to say about writing music from your tummy, from your gut, like more than your brain. Hate Song was the last song that we wrote for that album. And usually I find when you have a short amount of time and we just need one more song, and you let go of the tension and you just write. And if songs tend to write themselves, if it's a easy process, you just, this leads into this, and let's try this. That's when the songs, my experience, are the best songs, because if it needs to be emotional, I don't think they should be over thought. If that even is a English word. But if it's too if you need to spend several days thinking and solving like a huge problem, you can't make it work, then it probably doesn't work. So Hate Song is an example of a song that wrote itself in just 2 days or something. I know this is true also for At the Gates, for their Slaughter of the Soul album. They had maybe 2 days before the studio, they needed a fast opening track, and they wrote Blinded by Fear. I mean, my God, that is a great song, Another example of mine is we have an intro. I call it a song. People don't call it an intro because it doesn't have vocals. But on Haunted Made Me Do It, there's the first song is called Dark Intentions. And that's become almost like a doorbell signature song for the Haunted. And we were at rehearsal. Someone was tuning up or something, and I had this idea, and I asked Adrian to just go da 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 da, and I played this riff over it, and people were starting to pay attention. That then just go into this, and try this on the other guitar. And I think on the album, the song is 1.5 minutes long. I think it took me 3 minutes to write it, just because I just went with it. It wanted to be written. And those songs are, when that happens, this is also why I like writing in the studio, because it's much faster. You don't lose momentum. Like when you're in the computer, you go, okay, this is a great riff. Like, okay, open up the door. Well, what tempo is this? Okay, this tempo. Then you need to put some MIDI drums on there. Okay, then 5 minutes have passed, and then okay, so what's next? And then you kind of lose momentum that way.
It's a fractional thing, you talk about those 5 minutes have passed as you're programming the drums, but the reality is, like, the 5 minutes is the separation between that feeling and that spark of inspiration that you had at the time, and actually that spark fading. I was going to ask you the contrast between rehearsing, writing as a band, and doing it by yourself. It's something that I spoke to the members of a band called Daiva about the other day. What I've noticed is the bands that write like that, or at the very least have a history of writing like that, there is something that's more flowing and organic about their music as a result. Like, I think when you, I mean, and there's an awful lot of studio bands that I not studio bands, sorry, but bands that where one person's writing the music, or it's a thing where people are sharing MP3 files. A lot of those bands that I like, but there is definitely something to be said for the groove and the flow of the songs that come from 4 or 5 guys in a rehearsal space, blasting away on their instruments, and that energy that's between them starts to build up, and it leads to outcomes that ultimately make it onto an album.
Yeah, another thing that people tend to overlook these days, or that people think is how they should do it, is they record to a click. And when back in the day, or if something worked, then it worked. The band, if it's a good band, it doesn't matter if the riffs are not the same tempo or something. It could be a heavier part but have a higher BPM. If the band is good and they make it works. You will never notice as a listener. But when you're writing in the computer, you kind of, okay, I'm set at whatever 190, and then you need to kind of stick to that. Then you have a riff that comes after a good idea, but no, it doesn't work, and then you don't have any other song that's in 180. And then okay, I can't use this, and you chuck it. So that, I think, that's why the Haunted usually or used to record live in the studio, because those things you couldn't program them. So you just play along, and because we've rehearsed so much, we were rehearsing bad. We didn't even notice. If it worked, it worked. It sounds good, and no good riffs get thrown out, and if a band naturally, like AC/DC, they naturally increase the BPM during their choruses, and you just, as a listener, you kind of get picked up, and you don't even notice it. And that's what I think makes a band a real band. They don't even know what they're doing; they just do it instinctively, and makes for a better song, I think.
Well, I think writing and recording from that place of instinct and inspiration. To your earlier point about writing something that touches the emotions and that really gets the blood flowing, I think you are starting from a deficit if you're writing and recording in the way that you just described now. Beats per minute. I liken it to being at the gym. When you're using machines to do an exercise, you're restricted in your movement to just one particular thing, and it's not necessarily the best for every body type, for every shape. But when you're using, free weights, it works with your body. It's kind of the same principle. You go with what works for the band versus what's working for the app or for the whatever program you're doing that recording on. And again, I think the outcome, generally speaking, is something that I prefer. The magic of all the old albums that we all love, a lot of it comes from the fact that A, it was recorded very organically and written in the studio, and B, it wasn't perfect. The imperfections are what make it so great.
Yeah, imperfections, that's what gives it character. Well, okay, so you're going to get me started here on recording techniques, because I love music, and I've been thinking a lot on what why, at least I think that albums today aren't as good as they were back then. So if you are recording to a click, usually the drummer starts, and maybe not everyone is in the studio at the same time. So like if you have a band, say Slayer with Dave Lombardo, it will sound a certain way because it's Dave. Or if you had Alex Van Halen, it'll sound a different way because it's Alex, or Cozy Powell. People lean towards the drummer. So if the only member that's in the studio throughout the whole process is the click, then that is the thing that everyone leans against. Everyone is recording with click, then the click is the most important member. in every band that uses a click. So things, in my mind, I'm thinking things tend to start to sound the same, because there's no, I mean, would you, if Paul Bostaff or Dave is playing, there's a difference. But if everyone is leaning towards the click, then, what is the outcome? It'll be more or less the same.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you mentioned liking music. When you think about albums, you've referenced Slayer a lot, but what other albums stand out to you as, whether it's metal or outside of the metal scene, when you think about fantastic recordings that really captured the magic of whatever was going on in that studio or in that rehearsal space? What are records that stand out to you?
My absolute all-time favorite album, and this includes the songs, the production, the front cover, the back cover, everything. This is top-notch, everything. Don't Break the Oath by Merciful Fate.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that front cover alone. And then the back, the 4 pictures of the band members, then King walking into a burning house. I mean, what the hell? And the riffs and the sound is just, blows my mind how great that album is.
Yeah, that album cover, it has such an ominous feel to it. And I mean, for me, growing up in South Africa, it harkens back to those days of the books and the videos and stuff warning you, don't listen to this band, don't listen to that band. And I'll never forget seeing that cover for the first time and thinking to myself, this must be easily, like, I hadn't heard the record by that point. I was still very young, but this must be the most evil, terrible thing on the face of the earth. Yeah. And then, the next layer of thinking is, I absolutely have to hear it at some point soon. Yeah. But what a great record!
Yeah, amazing.
Outside of metal, have you any? Because you don't just limit yourself to metal, I would assume.
No, I mean, what would that be? I listened to Tom Petty, Chris Isaak, actually. Even some, the band Röyksopp.
Yeah, yeah.
Electronica, yeah. So,
dude, you know what I've been completely obsessed with over the last couple of years, really? It was Matt Wilcock from Werewolves that turned me on, that really got me into it. Rumors by Fleetwood Mac. I mean, only one of the most popular albums of all time. And I'm saying this sitting here with my Eaton Back to Life t-shirt, but the story around the album, every single fucking note recorded on the album, how it sounds when you hear it on a hi-fi. I mean, good God. I was saying to my wife the other night, because we were watching a documentary about it, and I said to her, like, that's how you know something truly exceptional has been created. I know dudes that are dyed in the wool death metal, black metal, like they only listen to the most fucking grim shit on earth. Yeah. And that's an album that they'll listen to on a regular basis. I was like, that's how you know something is good, when it is cut across every single genre you can imagine. Anybody who's anybody knows and loves, and at the very least respects that record.
Yeah, I love that album too. I'm also a big Beach Boys fan.
Yeah.
And another band that I've been listening to a lot lately, that's more contemporary, I guess, is Carpenter Brute. Have you heard them?
No, I haven't.
Synthwave is called. So it's heavily 80s, but it's
okay.
If you check out the video Turbo Killer, I mean, it must have like 8 million views or something. It's the most amazing video that you've ever seen. And the keyboard sounds are heavier than any guitar you'll ever hear.
I'll definitely have to check that out. Is it in the line of stuff like Boy Harsher, or what's the band, Lebanon something? Mike Hill really likes it.
It's more like what's that? What was it? Night Watch. Did you see the Olympics? The ending of the Olympics. They had a big show, and they had this guy come out and play.
No, I didn't.
Anyway, it's that kind of music. It's synthwave, so it's heavily 80s, kind of sentimental sounding, but it's so good.
I've got it queued up here, so I will definitely check it out, and I will email you my verdict later. Lebanon Hanover was that band I was referring to. It's kind of like 80s influenced goth music. I'll tell you what, though, you talk about great sounding organic records. I absolutely had to bring this up at some point, and it's a nice segue for us to go into it. Seance.
Yeah.
I recently got back into Forever Laid to Rest. Holy fuck, what an album. Like, it had been like quite a few years since I listened to it, and I was listening to the album the other day, and I thought to myself, why does this album not get spoken of amongst the very upper echelons of old school death metal nowadays? Because it's almost note perfect. The title track alone of that album is one of the fucking hardest things ever recorded, in my opinion. Just total violence, but still so musical and so memorable. Like, that's always been a thing for me with a lot of modern death metal bands. A lot of it is just brutality, which is great. It creates a great vibe. But, I still want to be able to remember the songs afterwards. And that album is just from start to finish a fucking masterpiece.
That's wow. Crazy. Almost. Well, some people do. If people know these albums, they tend to love them. So, like, you have a Cannibal Corpse t-shirt on. I know that Alex Webster loves Seance. And so, if you were around back then, first album, Forever Laid to Rest, came out in 92, then then you probably know about the album. We were misfortunate enough to be on Black Mark, and we didn't get any support. We also didn't sound like the typical Swedish band, so we didn't get kind of picked up, by German festivals and so on. I guess we sounded a bit more like Florida or something.
You did, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, but yeah, well, intense music has always been my forte. So, yeah.
What memories do you have of those days in Seance? Because you guys started right around the time that the death metal explosion was starting. So you weren't Johnny Come Latelys, who arrived after the wave had already come and gone. What was did you mentioned that you guys didn't sound like a typical Swedish band. Was that intentional?
I think it was because I came from thrash. So I had that kind of maybe a bit more technical approach to it. Like the Stockholm sound that came first with Entombed and Dismember, that was a lot more punk oriented.
Yeah.
And then that whatever came like At the Gates, the Gothenburg sound, everyone in Gothenburg loves Iron Maiden. So there you go. That's where the melodies come from. I'm in a city right in the middle, kind of. So we were a lot more into Priest and that kind of stuff. And I guess if we play Priest fast enough, it'll be thrashy. And that's how we got into it. I started my first band in 1987. First song I ever played was a Bathory cover. So yeah, as I got better, the more thrashier it got. And then eventually my first band, Or Christ, we merged with another local band called Total Death. Just became technical.
Well, you also did, you were part of a band that was truly grim. Another, I think, unsung legend of the early black metal scene, Satanic Slaughter. So you sort of you've been a figure in. I personally think bands that should have been far more acclaimed than they were at the time, and certainly should be more spoken of today.
Well, thank you. Satanic Slaughter was the first, black metal, thrash metal band in my hometown. They started out already in '85, and they were like the plant school. Do you see that? Like where musicians start and then they move on to something else.
Yeah, yeah.
So the guy that started it, Stefan, he never caught a break. He never got an album out. So I got him on the Necropolis Records label, and still nothing happened. So I guess I kind of joined to get things going and ended up writing the more part of that album. And I think it's a fantastic album. The fast songs are fucking fast. But then Stefan didn't like the direction the band was going, so he didn't fire us. He sent a mutual friend to rehearsal, and he said that, yeah, Stefan is not firing you, but he's leaving the band and taking the name with him. Like, all right. I don't know the big difference, but so that was when the four of us, that's when we started Witchery. So that's the story how we came about.
That's kind of like saying, hey, listen, you're not fired, but you're not allowed to come to the office anymore. And we're not paying you any longer.
Like, okay. Yeah, he wanted us to still be friends, and he didn't dare to say it to us. So yeah, we understood. That's all good.
So as a fan of music, there's two questions I have to ask you. You've had the opportunity to work. You referenced a couple of people earlier that you'd worked with on Witchery Records, and I know over the course of the Haunted's career, you've worked with Chuck Billy and people like that. Who's the musician you've worked with that you've learned the most from? By just purely observing them at work, you've gone, holy shit, like, that is something that I need to incorporate in my repertoire.
Maybe the person I've drawn most inspiration from, that might not be when I've been watching them recording solos, but just from their work, is probably Jim Durkin from Dark Angel. Darkness Ascends is one of my favorite thrash albums. And also Hank Sherman, Merciful Fate, of course. So
I was about to say this. I was kind of expecting you to say that, but who's the musician? Perhaps by contrast, possibly overlapping with the list you just gave. Who's the musician that you were most in awe of? Where you were like in a room with a person, you go, in the back of your mind, the teenage Patrik is going, how is this even possible?
Well, most in awe was actually Gary Holt, because he was so into it. I was so inspired by how much he loved playing. So that really inspired me.
So getting back to the new Haunted material, I know a lot of people that have heard the whole album end to end now, guys that also have podcasts or write for magazines and stuff. I've heard the whole thing. The response to the singles was really overwhelmingly popular. Does it feel good to you, given the ups and downs this band has had over the course of nearly 30 years now, to be able to release music after an 8-year absence and for people to get genuinely excited about it and there to be a generally positive buzz around what's going on with the band and about this anticipation for new material?
To be honest, we read the comments on the YouTube videos, and because we had this feeling of that the whole thing had a flat tire, we were going nowhere, and we weren't even. We went into the studio and we were thinking that we have good songs, but you never know. You have that feeling for every album, and then because we don't rehearse. We hadn't heard it with vocals. We hadn't heard it with solos. So we entered the studio. Oscar Nilsson, that has the studio recorded it, is a huge Haunted fan. So he was pumped up about recording us. And he's also a drummer. So he brought the best out of Adrian, really. So that was great. We put the bass guitar on, then the rhythm guitars, and then it was sent off. Ola did their solos in his studio in Stockholm. And also vocals. The last two albums, Marco lives in Stockholm, and you don't need a fancy studio to record vocals. So we used a guy, his name is Jocke Skog. He used to play with a band called Clawfinger, and that was great. Recorded the vocals and everything, but he had moved from Stockholm, so we couldn't use him anymore. So being the project leader, if you will, for this album, I was thinking, like, who can we use? We were talking about using Ola's studio because it's in Stockholm. But I don't think it's a good idea to have the singer, because, the singer's voice is his instrument, his or her instrument. And having the guitar player sit there with his arms folded and saying, you can do that better, doesn't fly, especially not with Marco. So I was thinking maybe we could find someone that talks to Marco as a singer. And Björn Strid from Soilwork came to mind, and he lives in Stockholm. I asked Marco about it, and he was at first maybe not so into the idea, because everyone knows Björn is a fantastic singer. It would probably be like Marco telling me, like, would you be up for recording rhythm guitars with James Hetfield? Like, maybe not. But so he agreed to it, and Björn was into it. And because Marco and Björn, they respect each other. Björn could talk to Marco in the singer's way, and Marco trusted his feedback. When we got the first 3-4 songs, the first batch back, and we could listen to, we all heard, we were blown away. I mean, this is probably the best that Marco's ever sounded. And Marco,
I agree with that.
Yeah, Marco was super happy too. So, and Ola's solos came back sounding better than ever, So when we got Jens Bogren to do the mix, and it came back, we were in the chat group that we have, messages started coming like, isn't this sounding really good? Like almost question mark. Like, I mean, we couldn't really believe what we were hearing, and we got to be super excited about the album. So we were, of course, curious to see what people thought. And the comments. You never know if have they forgotten about us, And the comments were heartwarming, to say the least. I had friends from all over that don't know each other message me, like they had heard the singles, message me saying like, it feels like coming home. And that's probably the nicest compliment I've ever gotten, because that means that you mean something to someone. Home is, you don't call anything home. It's, it means something. So yeah, we're only a couple of days left now until the album drops. So I'm very curious to hear what people will say about
it. I've picked up something interesting in the way you've been talking about the new material, and in the build up to releasing that new material. And it kind of feels to me, there's two things actually I want to touch on. One is, to what degree do you, as as an individual and as a member of the Haunted, wrestle with the idea of relevance? When you see new bands coming into the scene, B, as you point out, you think about the amount of time that you've been out of the spotlight, or out of people's consciousness, and you think, are people still going to remember, and are people still going to care?
I think it's a good thing that new bands are coming, because that means that the scene.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But of course, you want to be relevant, and we write music for our own sake, which I think every band should, because if you don't, then you're writing to fit a certain market or something, and it won't sound as good, I think. But when I've been doing shows with the Halo Effect, we've done signing sessions and stuff, and people, they come up and they say, don't forget about the Haunted. I've heard this so many times, and I'm like, well, so people, they care, and it felt like for a point there that we're letting something run through our hands here, that we're not taking care of this. Or of course we value it. It's not that, I'm not saying we don't care. I think we were frustrated, and we wanted to make as good as an album as we could. And we were just hitting, wall after wall. People saying that they still cared. We put out the music. We see their comments. I get these messages. It means a lot.
There's one other thing I want to ask you about, but I'm going to preface it with another question. In 2012, how close was the Haunted to breaking up for good?
Not in my mind. Me and Jonas were always the guys that liked metal. We were the ones that talked about, Bolt Thrower released a new album, or Saxon is playing. Are we going? In my mind, I started the band. I didn't want to see it end, because I thought we had more to give. Yeah, I don't think it was close to breaking up. We were very fortunate that we managed to get Adrian and Marco back in the band, and Ola, of course. So we got this great band back together. By getting Marco and Adrian back, they gave it some kind of more continuity, that we were still the core band. But yeah,
it gives it a degree of legitimacy because you're not getting brand new people in, and it's getting to a point where it's one original guy, or two original guys in the band. I do think that's important.
That can work. I mean, there are bands.
It can, yeah.
Yeah.
But I do think it's especially for a band like The Haunted, it is important. Now, this is the thing I wanted to ask you about. Is I picked it up in what you were saying. It feels to me, and you tell me whether you think this is an accurate read of what you've been saying to me. It feels to me like there was a process in rebuilding your confidence individually and collectively after 2012. And I feel like this new record is kind of the culmination of that, of kind of getting your feet back under you properly and feeling like you're coming from a position of power and of confidence rather than necessarily feeling like you have something to prove or maybe having a bit of uncertainty.
You mean it took us this long to shake the shadow of what was? Or
correct? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'd say that it has more to do with I didn't have the right sound to write with. It sounds very trivial, but for me to be able to write, and I guess being an integral writer throughout the band's career, I know that if I have the right sound, the right tools, the right me will come through. And I just wish I had this plug-in earlier, or that we were able to be rehearsing band, because then I'd have my amp right next to me, and I'd be fine. But I'm happy with Exit Wounds and Strength in Numbers, but I'm more happy with this album because I think it's closer to heart for me.
Well, I went back to both of those records when the new singles came out, and I did think to myself that these feel to me like records that potentially have been slept on a little bit. I mean, there are some phenomenal songs on those albums. Trend Killer, as an example, on Exit Wounds, fucking brilliant. And of course, it also features one of a true man's man, in Chuck Billy. But yeah, this definitely feels to me like it feels like you hit your stride once again. Another thing I wanted to ask you about. This takes me back to conversations I'd had with Marco. I actually batted with Peter as well. And I've, read various interviews where, you guys have always been reasonably outspoken as a band about the direction that the music industry is taking. And I know you manage the Haunted. What's your take? What's your perception of the music industry right now as it relates to a band operating at the level of the Haunted?
I don't have any opinions on what's popular now, or what bands do, because it's such a different landscape. Also, you have social media now and whatnot, and you don't make any money from albums. It's all touring and so on. The only thing I would say is that, like I touched on earlier, that bands should dare to trust their ability to be a band and to write more organically. In my mind, I like my metal to be dangerous. It needs to sound dangerous, and with that, I don't mean aggressive. It could be, a Whitesnake song. It can be dangerous in another kind of way. But when the band plays, I want to hear the band. I don't want to hear a competition of who can stay closest to the click. I mean, it'll be like if staying closest to the click means that you're tight, that means that it's measurable. You can measure who's tightest playing. And if it's measurable, it's not music, it's sports. So if bands could just uh, dare to trust their ability to be a band and just write. And it's like a painter. You're judged by how well you are with staying within the lines with the different colors. I mean, that's not what you would you say that to Rembrandt? Like you're messing up the colors here. No, that's what he wants to put out. That's what makes him gives him character, and that's what I would want to hear from bands more. Character. I want to hear bands differ.
Yeah, and you want to be able to immediately pinpoint after 3-4 notes, that's that band, or that's that guitarist, or that's that drummer. And that's always, to me, the mark of the very best bands. Like whether it's Testament that we've mentioned, Wasp, you talk about bands that, especially on their first 3 albums, sounded dangerous. Any number of other bands. I've got the Eden Back to Life t-shirt on right now. As soon as you hear 3 or 4 bars of Shredding Humans, straight away that's Eden Back to Life. Those are all of the best bands. Those are the albums that stick with you forever. That's
another great example. Like if you with Cannibal Corpse and Paul drumming, you immediately hear that it's Cannibal Corpse. And same with Obituary. They have their own way of timing things. You couldn't put if another band played a Obituary cover, it wouldn't sound like Obituary. They create this danger, like they are their own Rembrandts. They decide how much they want to stay within the lines, and they create character.
Yeah, just bear with me 1 second. Sorry, the dog is making a racket. She's a mainstay on the podcast now. But every so often she has to remind me that she's still alive. So that's why she was whining in the background there. But on the business end of things, if you had to map out what you think the next 5 years on the business side of the music scene is may look like, what do you see coming down the pipe?
You mean business-wise, as in making money, or what bands?
Yeah, well, business-wise, as in a band's ability to make money, how the commercial model might change, et cetera. I've got my own extremely strong views on certain aspects of the music business, but I'm keen to get your view as well.
Well, I mean, being a Swede, we have Spotify, of course. That's the big elephant in the room, and you're not making any money off of it, and they have their own algorithms, and I heard they're using AI to write music, so these make-believe artists that don't exist, so they put them into their playlists. So when they're they need to pay royalty, so they pay themselves instead. I think that's pretty sinister. But I don't know. Let me hear what your opinions are.
Well, I mean, I do think there has to come a point where the musicians need to start. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I hope somehow organically musicians organize and start to push back against the fucking parasites that sit across the value chain in the music business. I mean, example being merch cuts at venues. To me, it's literally the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of in my entire life. I can't. I've brought this up on the podcast many times before. I can't wrap my head around the justification for the band being responsible for bringing in the people who buy the booze at the bar, pay at the door, and then are expected to fork over 25% of whatever merchandise they sell when that's their sole source of income. So that to me is ridiculous. Another thing that I've strongly recommended bands that I know that are potentially in the firing lines of a couple of the moral groups of the day, I've said to them, stick in your contract a clause that has a sliding scale and suggests that if you pull us off the bill for any reason other than death or something otherworldly, the closer we get to show date, the more of our show fee you have to pay us. So if it's 6 months out, you have to pay us 50%. If it's 3 months out, you have to pay us 75%. If it's less than 3 months, you pay us 90%, because that will very, very quickly get people to distinguish commercial reality from a bunch of fucking idiots with nothing else better to do with their time complaining on the internet. So these sorts of things, I really hope we will see a big shift on in the future. I don't know whether I'm confident that will happen.
It's a good point. Needing to pay the house. I mean, you have, say, half of the places on a tour. They have people to sell, and they take 20% of the merchandise. But you still need merchandising people with you that you pay, because every other day there won't be. So you end up paying for someone that can't do their job. And as you say, you bring in the people. So if they get 20% of the merchandise, the band should get 20% from off the bar.
1,000,000%, completely agree with you.
Yeah.
Just on general principle, completely agree. Now you do a day job. You've got the Haunted, you've got Witchery, you've got the management responsibilities of things. What does an average day look like for you? How does this all get balanced up? You go to bed at 2 a.m., wake up at 2:30 a.m. and the day begins, or what does it look like?
I actually go to bed at 2 a.m. But I don't need many hours of sleep. But working a day job right now, it's 100% remote. So I lead the team from at home or on tour, which leaves a bit of leeway. If I need to do something, I can always work a bit later and so on. Now, this last month, up until the album is dropped, I've been doing interviews from like 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. every evening. So it makes for long days, and that's why I guess I'm up late. I also have a dog. He's a part collie, border collie, so he needs a lot of exercise. So I walk my dog 3-4 hours a day also, which is good. Gets me out of the house. Get
you stage ready as well.
Yeah, exactly. Keeps me fit. So and in between that, right up until this interview, I was practicing the live songs for the Haunted shows. So that's what I do.
And what shows have you guys got coming up?
Well, festival season, that gets booked after the festival season, the year prior. So between September and November, that's when all the festivals get booked. And when we dropped the first single, Warhead, in March, no one knew that we had a new album coming out. So all the festivals were more or less booked. So we had to get what we could, which means that our festival season for this album will be next year. But this fall, we've already done the tour with Halo Effect. That was in January, February in Europe. So this fall will be a bunch of shows. We're going to Japan and with the Haunted, and we're going to play as much as possible.
I'm going to wrap up with one last question, especially as we start to get to a landmark anniversary for the band. If you look back over the course of 3 decades with this band, what do you think, either individually or collectively, was the best possible decision that you took?
That was so I'm from a city called Linköping. It's 150,000 people. I think Sweden's 5th biggest city. As I mentioned, it's located between Gothenburg and Stockholm. Everyone here works at Saab making airplanes. So I don't know if you've heard about the fighter jet. Oh, it's South Africa, actually. Yeah, the Gripen. So I worked there for 5 years after I did my military service. And then, so that was 1990 to 95. And in 94, Seance did a tour with At the Gates. And I got along very well with Adrian. So I decided that I wanted to start a band with him. So the single most important decision I made was to quit my very nice job at Saab, move down unemployed to Gothenburg, saying to my parents and friends, I'm going to start a band. Sounds crazy, but it probably was. But that's what I wanted to do. And me and Adrian, we rehearsed the first time on July 27th, 1996. So next year will be 30 years.
Are you guys going to do anything to celebrate?
I'm thinking about things, what we could do. If you have any ideas, please, because if you want to do like a special show, say play the first album or something in its entirety, and you want to do it on the day, of course. But July is in the middle of summer. People won't be home, or they'll be broke because they've paid to see festivals. So that won't work. So I don't know. If you have any suggestions, I'm open.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Maybe do it at a festival. Do you think would any of the bigger festivals like Brutal Assault or maybe even Wacken, would they be open to hosting a 30th anniversary celebration for the Haunted?
I think if we said that we're going to play an album in its entirety, they might say yes. But in that case, to make it interesting enough, maybe it would have to be the Haunted maybe do it. But then that's not the 30th anniversary.
No.
So, yeah.
See, the thing is, I think you can play the hits, but what my thoughts are, if you're at a festival, you're going to have hopefully a lot of other bands there, people that you know, and that's when you start to throw in those fun surprises, get people, to come on stage with you, get somebody to do, I don't know, backing vocals. I'm a sucker for second vocalists on stage. So, I always love when there's like, I particularly love when the entire band is singing, but, get something like that. I mean, it's going to be, as an example, it's going to be Testament are putting out a new album later this year, is my understanding. So I'm sure they're going to be on tour. So hopefully you've got them. Exodus is putting out another album this year. So hopefully you've got Gary about. So there'll be people that you know. And as a fan, how fucking cool would it be if I'm standing in an audience and it's like, hey, the Haunted is playing some of their best stuff. They end off with Hate Song, and out comes Gary Holt on guitar, third guitar, and Chuck Billy is standing beside Marco doing vocals, maybe alternating verses or whatever the case may be. Something like that would be fucking brilliant.
That would be amazing, but that takes a lot of planning and a lot of management stuff and rehearsing, and it sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, if I think of something that's more feasible, I'll drop you a note.
All right. Cool.
But dude, thank you so much for your time. This was a really, really fun conversation. I very much appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy, but I'm very, very grateful you spent time with me, and hope we catch each other again down the road.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. All right, my man.
Thank you.
Take care. Songs of Last Resort, the title of the new Haunted album, their best material since 2003's One Kill Wonder. You just heard a track called In Fire Reborn, an absolute statement of intent, and if you have not been fully convinced yet by this, you were probably never a Haunted fan to begin with, which is fair enough, but to me, this is fucking absolutely top-tier modern thrash metal by a band who helped innovate the genre. I had a blast talking to Jensen. He has an open invite anytime he wants to come back on the show. There's more to discuss as far as the Haunted is concerned. I'd love to get deep into some satanic slaughter conversation. I'd also like to talk a bit more about Seance, because frankly, more people should be talking about this band. For Never Laid to Rest was the name of their record back in 1992. Absolutely killer Swedish death metal that did not sound like every other band in Sweden. And before we go anywhere further in this episode, it would be utterly remiss of me not to remind you of that. So off For Never Laid to Rest, this is the title track for your listening pleasure. From the legendary debut album by Sweden's Seance, that was a song called For Never Laid to Rest. That was released on the 8th of June, 1992 through Black Mark Production, and it featured, or at least that album featured, this week's guest, Patrik Jensen, now of The Haunted. Fucking sensational stuff. If you have not listened to that album in a while, or if it passed you by altogether, do yourself a favor and check it out again. As I've been going through this old school kick of mine, I've just been digging up so many albums that, I either haven't listened to for 20 years or actually never listened to at all. This was certainly one of the gems that I uncovered over the course of the last probably 6 weeks or so. You will find it, incidentally, on my scintillating workout playlist that I shared a couple of weeks ago. That playlist entitled Pain is Weakness, the sequel. If you are using it, sources say, or sources confirm, that you should be packing on at the very least 20 pounds of muscle every month. Right now, my friends, if you have ever thought of a silent disco as anything other than a long, soul-destroying, torturous, and painful experience, then it might be time for you to hit the bricks, because this is my weekly news rant.
Round them up for judgment. And hang them where the world can see.
All right, my friends, metalstorm.net is where we kick off, as always, the finest metal news website in all the land. Just before we start, make note, I probably won't be doing a numbered episode next week. And the reason for that is I am leaving early on Friday morning to drive to Scarborough for Fortress Festival, and we're only coming back later on Monday afternoon. So, between all the interviews I'm going to be recording there, the panel interviews that I'm doing, or the live podcasts that I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be recording some content that I'll put out on YouTube only. So what I would like to do at this point is a walkthrough of the festival, just to show you guys what it looks like. I want to do a festival recap. I'd love to, just kind of give you guys, that anyone who's not going to be there, a feel for what, what the mood, the atmosphere, the look and the vibe of the whole place is all about. I've got something I'm super excited about that I'm doing with Cheyenne for a project he's doing that's not directly related to Iblis Manifestation. So that's going to take up a bit of my time. So I'm just not going to have time to do a numbered episode. I held off mentioning that in the beginning of the show, because the way I see it is, there are some folks that drop off after the interview portion of the podcast. That's absolutely fine. But clearly, the members of the Legion that stick around for the news rant, you guys are the higher ranking ones, and the ones that need to be kept in the loop. There will probably be some content that I'll drop next week, but like I said, it just won't be a numbered episode. The week after, I do think I may switch for a period of time to twice a week, just because I've started to build up a bit of a backlog of interviews, and with everything I'm going to be doing at Fortress and everything else I've got scheduled, plus everything else that's potentially coming up at Beyond the Gates, I don't want to let those interviews sit around until they've got too much dust on them. So. Just thought I would let you guys know, if you are at Fortress Festival and you see me, of course, come and say hello, but also make sure that you check out those live podcasts I'm going to be doing. Necro's Horns, as well as Frank from Fen and Fellwarden. It'll probably be about a half hour's worth of me talking to them, and then we'll turn it over to the audience for 15-20 minutes worth of questions, depending on how chatty you guys are feeling. So participate, be there. I can't wait to meet as many people as possible, and I really, really enjoyed doing those conversations last year. Part of the reason I brought the questions into this year, or I insisted that every single one that I host will have that time set aside for questions, is because I felt last year when we did that was the panel where I kind of felt the energy was at its best, if you know what I mean. So anyway, the countdown carries on to Fortress. It really is going to be a big one this year, and just once again, just to stress, the bill alone should make your knees fucking buckle if you are a black metal fan. I don't think we've seen in the UK a black metal oriented festival that has a lineup anywhere near this close. So kudos to Gary and everybody at the festival for what they've done here. It's absolutely fucking savage. All right, first music we're going to be listening to, Deathgoat, Clinically Undead Song Unveiled. 2 weeks ahead of their second LP release, Dragged into Realms Below, death metalers Deathgoat stream a visualizer video for the third new track in advance, entitled Clinically Undead. So there's a lot to like here. The opening sequence of the song where you have that sample of tortured human beings, people wailing and gnashing their teeth against the backdrop of that very cool, eerie guitar melody. I think that works really, really well. It creates a lot of ambience and it helps set the tone for the song really nicely. When the guitars kick in properly, you know straight away that you are in Dismember worship territory, and it probably shouldn't surprise anybody to learn that Deathgoat appeared on a tribute compilation released last year by Bass Record Productions called Dreaming in Red, Dreaming in Death, a tribute to Dismember. The song that they covered was Skin Her Alive, so if you haven't seen that yet, probably one to check out if you're a massive Dismember fan and you want to hear other bands covering them and sounding almost exactly the same. So, again, I kind of have to temper my positivity here with some of the bad. Deathgoat are the word symptom just went into just popped up in my head, but I think that's too harsh a description. It feels to me like there's not a week that goes by where we are not hearing bands from the school of Entrails and Fuming Mouth that all have that very distinct love of Dismember and Left Hand Path era Entombed, and insist on putting it in every single thing that they do, up to and including the production, which if they don't go directly and record at Sunlight Studios, then they certainly make their guitars sound exactly like, any band being, putting out death metal in Sweden in the early 90s, not named Seance. Now, again, that's not a bad thing. If you can't get, if you don't get your fill from that style of death metal through the early masters, or the many other bands like Bloodbath and, I would argue to a lesser degree, Fuming Mouth, who've done it really, really well since then Deathgoat is definitely going to be the band for you. I really like that, chugging groove at the end where we hit pause. I think the actual main riff is very, very cool. It's a well-constructed, well-written, enjoyable track. It's something that if somebody put it on in the background, it definitely would not be objecting to it whatsoever. I'd say the vocals are maybe a little nondescript for the style of metal, but the problem is I sit here questioning whether or not I'm going to remember this band's name when I'm done recording the news rant, let alone next week. And the answer to that question is one I'm a little less certain of, and thus I'm going to hold off giving this either a thumbs up or a top notch. Like I said, there's a lot to like, but if I want to hear that style of music, there's a lot of older albums where it's already been done, it's been done way better, and I don't necessarily need to hear it attempted again. So, that's my take on Deathgoat. Now let's move on to Lord Belial. Black metal purveyors Lord Belial have released a new track entitled The Whore, which serves as the second advanced single of their upcoming album Unholy Trinity, and which the band assure us is not in reference to their vocalist's ex-girlfriend. That part I made up, of course, but this part I'm not making up. The album is scheduled for a June 27th, 2025 release. Another part that I'm not making up is the fact that I have been more excited for the release of Unholy Trinity than possibly for anything that Lord Belial have ever put out. Back in the day, Kiss the Goat and Enter the Moonlight Gate were on that postal order, on that massive mail order frenzy that myself and my friend Andre went on through the Nuclear Blast mail order catalog. Both of those records were good. At the time, I was also, we were also buying a lot of other very exciting things, Satyricon, Emperor, Immortal, things that maybe resonated with me a little bit more, but I have kept up with Lord Belial since. Maybe lost track a little bit after the Black Curse, but obviously, they had their lengthy break. It was 2008 that the Black Curse came out, and Rapture, their comeback album, that was 2022. Now, Unholy Trinity, though, the first song that we heard, I think was called, if memory serves me correctly, Glory to Darkness. That was absolutely magnificent. That had me massively excited about the record, and we're going to find out whether or not this song is going to add to or subtract from that. Gotta say, that is another top notch. No question about it. Similar vibes to that Glory to Darkness single. It's aggressive, it's angry, it's instantly recognizable as Lord Belial. They are writing in a style that is not intentionally a throwback, but certainly sounds retro. It's them writing Lord Belial music, and for a band that's been going as long as they've been going, even when you include their 12-year, or 14-year break, that is saying something. I mean, I think this is the 10th album that they've put out. Really like the production as well. It's crystal clear, but it still sounds punchy. And that sequence and I actually checked the timestamp when it came up, because you could just tell at about the 1.5-minute mark, you could tell it was building up to something cool, something big. When the vocalist shouts, "Open the gates to Babylon," and you've got that gear shift where you've got those keyboards that are kind of just sat in the back of the mix, but it adds that extra level of atmosphere and ambience. Superb, works extremely well. So yeah, this to me is shaping up to definitely be one of my most anticipated albums of the second half of this year. And I do think the second half of this year we're going to see a big step up in new music. Of course, I've spoken about Tombs, I've spoken about Werewolves, but I feel like there's a lot of other good stuff that's going to be coming our way as well. So yeah, we've got the year might be moving at a brisk pace. I mean, it certainly still feels to me like it should be January. Maybe that's just getting older. But I think the next 6 months, music-wise, I think we're going to hear some fucking absolutely badass stuff. Before we go on to any new music, let's check out some questions. I'll pull up some of the old questions that the Legion submitted. The first one, Razor Eater Metal has asked, what is your favorite Phil Anselmo side project other than Down, Superjoint, or Scour? Well, it's easy, of course. Pantera. No. My favorite Phil Anselmo side project would be N Minor, definitely. I'm really. It's really unfortunate that he hasn't done more N Minor, because I think that style suited his voice, particularly his voice as he's grown older, really, really well. And I just like dark, bluesy, music like that. If you haven't heard the N Minor record, came out on Season of Mist about 3 years ago, I believe. And it's kind of like if you imagine a record that takes the darkest elements of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds and filters them through the mellow moments on the second Down record, that's kind of what the record sounds like. I think it works very, very well, and for me, that is unquestionably the best non-Down, non-Superjoint Ritual, non-Scour Phil Anselmo side project. We've got another one from A Million Worms. He has asked, the 3 metal records you either remaster or remix. So, I thought long and hard about this. I would say, first of all, Akrakoka, Rape of the Bastard Nazarene. For me, it's a very good album, but it's got a couple of problems. One being the guitars sound way too thin and they're too far back in the mix. The whole mix is the balance of the mix is just not right. They fixed that with Goat of Mendez to a point, and then Corenson to me was perfect. That is exactly how the band should sound. Neil Kernan, of course, did a lot of work on that record, which I think helped a lot. But I think if you could get somebody competent to revisit Rape of the Bastard Nazarene, I think you would do something pretty goddamn spectacular. Then one that I actually heard remixed. Like, you get these dudes that go on YouTube and they'll do like a remix and remaster of an album and upload it. Andy Kyrat, he does a lot for Metallica and did a remaster for Injustice for All, where the bass was turned up to, you know, acceptable levels, to not non fucking shit sounding levels, and it sounded phenomenal. Really, really made it sound good. There's another one I discovered a couple of weeks ago, which makes the timing of this question quite ironic, where a dude by the name of Simon Pietroforte had remastered Effigy of the Forgotten by Suffocation, and oh my god, did he do a fucking first-class job of that. Problem with Effigy of the Forgotten for me has always been that it sounded a little bit muddy. The guitars were badass, but like it was there's parts of the album where it just feels like the guitars are playing a rhythm, and you completely lose the technical intricacies of the riffing. And what Simon did was to really, really accentuate that. And it makes the album as a whole hit that much harder, sound that much more aggressive. And I mean, it took an album that was already excellent and made it sound fucking 10 times better. So that would be my second one. And then my third one is something that J-Doc has actually been talking about on his channel recently, and I happen to agree. Ageless Venomous by Crisian, an album that was a big step up for them in terms of songwriting and in terms of the quality and the intricacies of the songs, but really, really suffers because of the just very sterile sounding production job. And that was, as far as I'm aware, one of the very first records that Eric Rutan produced. I might be wrong on that, so don't all dive into the comments and say, "You fucking idiot." Not that you guys do that, but I think if memory serves me correctly, it might have been one of the first that he ever produced, and it just wasn't very good. The production let that record down a lot. I think it's partly why people overlook it today. Later on, when they put out Works of Carnage, and even that Bloodshed EP, I mean, that's to me how Crisian should sound: beefy but still raw. Those would be my three. Ageless Venomous by Crisian, Effigy of the Forgotten by Suffocation, Rape of the Bastard Nazarene by Akrakoka. All right, let's move on to some more music. We've got one here by, let's see what I'm in the mood to listen to. Gruesome. Oh, man. Speaking of fucking bands that got me excited, the last Gruesome single we listened to, I was absolutely blown away by. So, Gruesome have posted a new single. Condemned Identity is the newest single and opening track of Gruesome's forthcoming long player, Silent Echoes. It has premiered online in the form of an official music video. If I had to make one, if I had to raise one objection to what I've just heard, I would have liked there to have been a bit more of a connection between the intro and the main riff. When you got that intro, and then when the actual main riff, when the song kicks in properly, that change to me feels a little bit abrupt, and it could have been handled with a little, with a bit more dexterity, I think. Once you get past that, the song is absolutely crushing. Gus and Matt both absolutely at the top of their game. I'm racking my brain trying to think of an album that Matt Harvey appeared on where he sounds better than the songs that I have heard him do on, or the 2 tracks that they've released off this forthcoming gruesome record. I mean, this dude has been in the game for a very, very long time. He's obviously got a, lengthy curriculum vitae, but I cannot recall him sounding better. Gus Rios, of course, an absolute beast on the drums. And then Daniel Gonzalez, fucking absolute savage. I could have just gone on listening to that song right up until the very end, because the solo that he was starting to rip into there where we hit pause, that sounded superb as well. If Chuck Schuldiner is, if there is a heaven and Chuck Schuldiner is looking down at Gruesome from up above, he's got a big old smile on his face, and so do I. Top notch, without a doubt. Okay, let's move on, my friends. There's a lot to get through this week, and one of the big ones, Blackbraid, reveal a new song and video. In the wake of the forthcoming studio release, Blackbraid 3, due out on August the 8th, Blackbraid offer in listening the first single, War Drums at Dawn, on the Day of My Death. I like it, and I make absolutely no apologies for liking it. I know that there's people that are going to have heard that and, almost immediately have zoned out, and that's fine. I think particularly after what happened at Midgard's Blood, I think, that's just unfortunately a hill that Jonathan created for himself, and that, hopefully he can overcome at some point. But if you ignore all of that nonsense and all of that noise, listen to the song. I think the song's good. It's, strong modern black metal. It doesn't sound like it's trying desperately to be mainstream. I think you could make potentially an argument that suggests that the production is a little too polished. But, that also kind of falls flat in the wake of the many other bands that a lot of people love where the production is even more polished than that. So, that wasn't of any concern to me. I actually thought the production sounded cool. I like the balance. I like the fact that it gives equal weight to every single element in the song. The only thing that I would say is missing for me here, the opening riff repeats, I think, a little bit too... Or the opening sequence, I should say, repeats itself a bit too long. It's a bit too drawn out. You kind of looking for that next bridge or that next sequence that counterbalances what you've just heard and helps that opening sequence have that much more impact. So I feel like this is a song that at 4 minutes 56 might have a little bit of fat on it, which usually wouldn't be the case with a song that is sub 5 minutes. But I feel like there might be a little bit of fat on it, having not heard the whole thing. But what I've heard so far, I like. Thumbs up, definitely. If I compare that to Lord Belial, I would say Lord Belial I'm definitely more excited about. But I would say of newer black metal bands, Blackbraid definitely deserve, a lot of the attention coming their way. Let's do another question or two before we go on to some more music. Metal Sheck has asked, one extreme metal band that you'd love but you'd never want to interview. One I love but I don't necessarily want to interview. The answer to that question is none. I would like to interview all of the extreme metal bands that I love. There are maybe one or two people that I would be apprehensive about speaking to. One of them, honestly, is Glenn Benton. The reason for that is I think he's the kind of guy that I think things can go either way with him. You can either meet him and he's absolutely awesome and he's going to give you a really great conversational interview. I think depending on who else he has spoken to that day, he could be in an understandably very shitty mood, because how are you not going to be annoyed when, 30 people in a single day have asked you, so tell me about the inverted crucifix you branded on your forehead, and tell me about not killing yourself at 33, and fucking nonsense. When are the Hoffmans coming back? So there's all that sort of fucking dog shit that he has to contend with. And so therefore I can understand his impatience. But I wouldn't want to be in the situation where I've caught somebody whose music I really, really love on a bad day, and everything just kind of falls apart as a result. So the answer to Metal Sheck's question is there's nobody that I wouldn't want to interview, but there's some people that I would... I'd be careful about when I interview them, what the nature of that interview would be, if you understand what I mean. Maybe actually not what the nature of the interview would be, but maybe it's more a question of, like, when it's done, what are the logistics? I wouldn't want to catch him after a bunch of other interviews, as an example. And actually, on top of that, I wouldn't want to catch him in an album cycle. Because, I mentioned this to Jensen. I can't even remember if it's included in the interview or not, but we did talk a little bit after I hit stop. And he was, really complimentary and really nice about the conversation. But, I said to him, I feel for, someone like you who's doing probably 150 to 200 interviews and you're getting asked the same old bullshit over and over and over again. I would fucking hate for somebody to be on an episode of Into the Necrosphere and feel like it's all going to be predictable. I couldn't live with myself doing an interview like that. All right, I got another question here, and I'm going to apologize because I forgot to write down the name of the person that asked me this question. So if you if you can remind me who it is, I'll make sure you get your shout out. But the question was, what are my top 5 favorite Death Doom albums? The gentleman in question did highlight the fact that, and I've just recalled this from the question, that he knows I don't necessarily like Doom, but what Death Doom albums do I like? That is pretty easy for me, because without a question, also without any fucking shadow of a doubt, Paradise Lost Gothic is the best Death Doom album that has ever been recorded. There's absolutely no two ways about it. Second, My Dying Bride, Songs of Darkness, Words of Light, the best thing that they ever did. Number 3, Evoken, Embrace. I think Embrace played a very significant role in the formation of one of my other favorite albums, Exuvia by the Ruins of Beverast. If you can't hear the direct link in the influences from Embrace through to that album, you're fucking deaf. Catatonia, Brave Murder Day. Might not like their latest stuff, but Brave Murder Day is a masterpiece. And then November's Doom, The Pale Haunt Departure. November's Doom are really, really good. And by the way, just as a number 6, not in my top favorite Death Doom albums of all time, but if you want to hear fantastic modern Death Doom, Mother of Graves. I've spoken about them on the podcast before. I've been meaning to get them on the show at some point, but both, I think they've put out 2 albums at this point. Both albums are 9 out of 10 easily. I have not heard another band from this era doing music that sounds that fucking good in this style. All right, Hexvessel drop Mother Destroyer song. Apologize for the racket in the background. I don't know why the dog is being so difficult today, but she's kind of become a support character on the podcast. So, if you watch, especially if you watch this on YouTube, I think there's rarely an episode where you can't see her in the background at some point. So she is 13, and whenever I get annoyed with one of her antics, I do have to remind myself that there's going to come a point where I'm gonna miss her like crazy, not being in the background of my videos. So not to get all mopey, but anyway, Hexvessel have dropped a new song. It's called Mother Destroyer. Hexvessel unveil a visualizer video for Mother Destroyer as the final advanced single from their forthcoming 7th long player, Nocturne, due out on June the 13th, 2025 via Prophecy Productions. I will say the same thing that I said when we listened to the previous Hexvessel single. You either like this band or you don't. I happen to be somebody who does love this band very much. When Polar Veil came out in 2023, that was one of my favorite albums of that year. Nocturne, I'm not sure, is going to hit the same heights that Polar Veil did. I've enjoyed every single one of the singles that I've heard so far, but it's not grabbing me with the same level of. I'm not getting that kind of punch through the chest, grabbing and squeezing my heart feeling that I got hearing Polar Veil for the very first time. That being said, though, I'm still really enjoying this, and I think this is an album that's going to require a lot of listening. I mean, again, if you don't know anything about Polar Veil, it shouldn't surprise you to know that Matthew McKerney, the vocalist and guitarist for the band, and one of the main dudes in the band as far as songwriting is concerned, that he was used to be in a band called Code. If you know Code, they definitely have they are very, very avant-garde, and they're at their best when they're kind of all over the place and spacey. And to me, there's a direct thread from Code into Hexvessel, or at the very least, I like Hexvessel for the same reasons that I like Code. So, yeah, for me, this is a thumbs up, without a doubt. But I'm again, as I said, I'm not quite as excited about this forthcoming record as I've been about Polar Veil. But I think that may change once I hear the whole thing, once I can properly spend some time listening to it. As I lay crying, touring Europe later this year, how the fuck that band... I tell you something what blows my mind, and it's the last time I'm going to speak on him, but I do not understand how Tim Lambesis only had 2 years in prison. I mean, if ever there's fucking... They talk about America having a broken justice system, that's the sign of a broken justice system. You paid a fucking deposit to have your wife killed, and you just so happened to have or to be thwarted through a sting operation, and you get 2 years for good behavior. That's just a fucking complete joke as far as I'm concerned. And then post prison, he has proven himself time and time again to be a complete and utter fucking scumbag. But for some reason, he's allowed to continue walking the streets a free man. I don't get it. You know my thoughts on his behavior towards that dog, for being cruel to an animal alone. As far as I'm concerned, it's in with the hippos, in with the lions, or in with the crocodiles. You get your pick in Jackie's world. Sinsanium released their first new track in 7 years. Blackened death metal band Sinsanium, featuring guitarist Frederick Leclerc, formerly of Dragon Force, creator and Loud Blast, as well as Stefan Burries of Loud Blast. Co-lead vocalists Sean Zatarsky of Darth and Ex Chimera, and then Attila of Mayhem, together with bassist Haymoth of Seth, will return later this year with their third album, In Devastation. It's due out on August the 8th via Ear Music. I remember when Sinsanium put out their first album, they, of course, had Joey Jordison of Slipknot. I think at that point it was formerly of Slipknot drumming for them. If memory serves me correctly, he started Sinsanium after he'd left Slipknot. But either way, I remember when that first record came out, I was genuinely shocked that Attila was keeping company with men from such relatively accessible bands. The album wasn't particularly great either, so I don't have very high hopes for this, but anything that Attila is part of, I'm at least going to be curious in hearing what it sounds like. So, as I mentioned, the song is called In Devastation. Let's hear what it sounds like. I'm going to go ahead and assume that Attila is no longer with the band because I can't hear him anywhere unless he's the one doing the backing vocal. In which case, I mean, it's so nondescript. You may as well have had, anybody doing that with a band. I mean, musically, this doesn't sound too bad. I didn't even realize that Sensanium have got 2 albums out previously: Echoes of the Tortured, that they put out in 2016, and then Repulsion for Humanity that came out in 2018. They carry with them Echoes of the Tortured has a cool 67% on Metal Archives. Repulsion for Humanity has 55%. This to me sounds like a modestly more black metal Devil Driver. I mean, right down to the vocals. Even the vocals remind me a little bit of Des Fafara. It's not doing a huge amount for me. It's not dreadful. Like I'm not sitting here feeling sick to my stomach, feeling like the testosterone is ebbing out of my fingernails. But it's not something that I'm going to jump up and down with excitement over. It says here the upcoming release marks Sensanium's first new material since the passing of founding drummer Joey Jordison in 2021. The album serves as a cathartic tribute to both Jordison and guitarist founder Frederick Leclerc's late father, with themes of grief and loss shaping its tone. Leclerc added to that, "I was devastated, hence the title of this new album, but we knew we had to carry on. The record is a tribute to my father, to my father and to Joey, and to anyone who's ever had to find the strength in their darkest moments. Drumming duties have been taken over by Andre Joyzy, who previously worked as Jordison's drum tech. He sounds very good. And, let's focus on the positive. Joey Jordison was a phenomenal drummer, just absolutely phenomenal. If you go back and watch I think it was 2003, the download where Metallica had some sort of issue. I mean, the legend has it, I think Lars was so coked out of his mind that he couldn't make it to download, and they presented it as travel logistical problems, blah blah blah. They got Dave Lombardo to do drums for part of the set, and they got Joe Jordison to do drums for another part of it. It sounded superb, absolutely superb when both men played. But I'd say Joe Jordison in particular delivered some just a phenomenal performance. All right. Before we get on to some more music, another 2 questions. We've got one from frequent question submitter, Kelu666. He says, which bands fit all the specs of what is top-notch to you on paper, but you simply can't get into, and vice versa? Which bands that for you would sound totally crap in theory do you oddly quite enjoy? So I've spoken about Blood Incantation before. They definitely would be a band that I would say fit in that realm. On paper, I should love them, and for whatever reason, I cannot get into them. And a band that on paper I should absolutely hate, but I have a bit of a soft spot for, not really bands as much as albums. You all know my love of Static X's debut record, Wisconsin Death Trip. I think that is phenomenal, and I don't mind the rest of their stuff either. It's not great, but it doesn't bug me. And then King 810, don't really like the band, but their second album, L'amour petit, is fucking brilliant. It's kind of everything that style of music should be. It is authentic, it's dark, it's interesting, it weaves in a load of different elements, and but at the same time, it is very much still a new metal album. And I think at the time that they put that out, I don't know whether Roadrunner had hopes for them to be the next Slipknot. From memory, I think I listened to a Monty Connor interview where he basically said as much. And with that record, they sort of went a bit off-piste and did something so dark. I don't think that it was meant for mass consumption. So, on paper, not a band that you would necessarily think that I would like. I don't like all their albums. As a matter of fact, I actively dislike most of their other albums. But L'amour petit, their second record, definitely one I would suggest you check out if you haven't done yet. It might just surprise you. And then, Blood Incantation. Like I said last week, maybe I'll get to a point where I sit here and I go, I was totally wrong on that band. They are actually fucking brilliant, but right now I don't feel that way. Last question for this week. AV Overkill has said, I really enjoyed hearing your unpopular takes on music. I would love to hear your top 5 unpopular movie takes. So this is where I see a exodus of unsubscribers. I'm just kidding, of course. But this is just my opinion, but I'll give you 5 movie takes that aren't necessarily popular. Starting with number 5 and counting my way down to number 1. Partly because I think number 1 is going to be the one that's the most contentious. The only reason, in my view, why Jordan Peele is as an acclaimed filmmaker as he is because, at least for a period of time, it was politically expedient to do so. I don't think he's a great director. I don't think he has put out a single movie that is anything deserving of anything more than a 6 out of 10. Get Out is his best film. That's a 6 out of 10. It had the kernel of a decent idea, but in execution, it fell apart. I particularly disliked the ending, and I feel like anytime I see that on a list of the best horror movies of all time, that list instantly has no further credibility in my mind. Number 4, I think The Batman is better than any of Christopher Nolan's Batman movies. Number 3, the only truly great Marvel movie ever made was the first Blade. Everything else is fucking drivel. Slight exception, perhaps, to Guardians of the Galaxy. But honestly, if those 2 movies had never been made, or if I never see them again, I also won't give a shit. The first Blade album, fantastic. Everything else is a variation on the following formula. Nerd gets, superpowers. Psychopath wants to destroy the world or take over the planet. Loads of property destruction. The end. Fucking absolutely god-awful. I hate it. When I saw the trailer to Thunderbolts, I honestly, I would rather have a brick dropped on my foot repeatedly than sit through that shit. Number 2, with the exception of Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones movies are all unwatchable. I recently went through the first 3 with my daughter. It is shocking how badly Temple of Doom and The Last Crusade have aged. Temple of Doom in particular, that fucking little sidekick kid that he's got in the movie should be fired out of a cannon into the middle of the Pacific, and behind him should be the annoying woman that's in the movie. And then The Last Crusade, I remember loving that when I was young, and it's disturbing how poor it is when you watch it 20 years or 30 years later. So Raiders of the Lost Ark, almost perfection. Everything else, complete and utter nonsense. Speaking of complete and utter nonsense, and here is the point that's going to be potentially the most hotly contested. Wait for it. With the exception of The Empire Strikes Back, which was lightning in a bottle, Star Wars is a load of fucking bullshit. I've watched all of them again recently, and when I say all of them, I mean the ones that haven't been made by Disney in the kind of last run. Even though I went to go watch, which one was it? I think the second to last one I watched at the cinema, and that was excruciating. But I watched all of the earlier Star Wars, starting with A New Hope, and then Empire Strikes Back, then Return of the Jedi. I watched all of that with my daughter. Empire Strikes Back, I don't know why it's such an exception, because it's an almost perfect movie, in my opinion. But everything else, holy fucking Jesus. The script writing of a moderately well-budgeted porno... The fucking the acting is, it's so bad, it's laughable, and then just everything else about it. And to this day, I can't wrap my head around grown men cosplaying as Star Wars characters, especially cosplaying as Ewoks and stuff like that. And then you see the passion that series inspires. People that, sit watching trailers and they burst out crying, overwhelmed with emotion because there's another Star Wars movie coming out. I'm lost for words, honestly. Better trilogies than Star Wars. Back to the Future, no question. Lord of the Rings, no question. I'd go as far as to say the Hobbit trilogy is better than anything. You can stick a bookend between 3 Star Wars movies in the series and say that's the trilogy. Hobbit would beat it every single time. The Ass Worship trilogy by Jules Jordan is better than fucking Star Wars. So there you go. My top 5 unpopular movie takes. All right, let's hear 1 or 2 more songs and let's move on. Unleashed, new record coming in August. Details available. Swedish death metal veterans Unleashed have disclosed details and a first single, War Comes Again, as part of their forthcoming studio release, Fire Upon Your Lands. That is due out on August the 15th, 2025. Produced by Frederick Folker, mixed by Frederick Folker at Chrome Studios, blah, blah, blah. I don't give a fuck about the credits. Album cover looks reasonable. Unleashed, never really a band that did very much for me. I remember seeing the music video for Before the Creation of Time, thinking it's almost laughably poor. I have gone back to that song and still think that it sucks. I know that Before Where No Life Dwells is considered a classic. It's not considered a classic in the Smith house. But who knows? Perhaps War Comes Again can convince me otherwise. So let's listen. I dislike this for the exact same reasons that I dislike Amon Amarth. The lyrics sound as though they were written by a 12-year-old. The melody is... It sounds as though someone was whistling a tune as they took a piss. And then they thought to themselves, this will sound great when put through a distortion pedal. And thus War Comes Again was born. It is total all show, no go. It's not heavy. Yeah, it's nothing here works. This is a thumbs down. I don't get the appeal to this band. I really don't. I know there's a lot of people that like them. I am not one of them. And I don't believe that I ever will be. Right, we're going to wrap up with a few extracts from the Democrat's Guide to Rock Music, Blabbermouth. One in particular that I have been super interested in digging into. Ishon on Emperor making new studio album. If we do it, it would have to be for the right reasons. Now, the backdrop to this is that probably about a year ago, you may or may not have recalled that Swatov and I mentioned this on a news rant. We said at the time, if they're talking about it the way they're talking about it, there's a very good chance something is happening. I know he doesn't have necessarily any, background information outside of what our speculation was. And if he did and he shared it with me, of course, that would be G14 classified. I wouldn't share that with anybody on Into the Necrosphere. No matter how near and dear you guys are to me, word is bond and all that. But I do feel something's going on. there were these conversations happening last year for a period of time about writing a new album. Then it all went quiet. They said no, it's definitely not happening. Ishan brought out his solo record. And by the way, I might be getting that timeline confused because I'm just thinking now. I'm sure that last solo album came out early-ish last year. Either way, this happened before that solo record. Then the solo record came out. I thought, okay, maybe I'm wrong. I think, again, I might even have speculated that some of the material that he wrote for the potentially could have written for a new Emperor record ended up on that solo record. But the fact that it's coming up again and that there's kind of this denial but not in a denial, I believe, and I base this purely on speculation, that I think it's back on the table again. And I will make a prediction that before the end of 2026, there's going to be an announcement saying they're putting out a new album. I might be totally wrong, but if that is indeed the case, then on this day, on the year of our Lord, the 26th of May, at 7:38 p.m., you will have heard me correctly predict the future. So, anyway, enough of my shit talking. Let's actually listen to an extract from the interview and hear what he had to say. So this is an interview that was conducted by Jorge Botas of Portugal's Metal Global. And he point blank asked Ishan whether or not there will be a follow-up to Prometheus, the Discipline of Fire and Demise, a non-Emperor album, in my opinion. Let's hear what Ishan had to say.
Is there any chance in hell of another Emperor music?
Well, I would have hoped I got paid. I could get paid for every time I was asked that, but but it's very, very hard for me to answer because once in one interview it's like, okay, because I've always said no, and then I said, okay, I also said that there would never be any more Emperor live shows, and so I don't want to make myself a liar. So it's like, if stars align, in the sense where and we have been going, with the live stuff for a long time. But if we were to make something, I think that the reason behind it would have to be right.
Yeah.
I like to think that the reason that Emperor still gets to tour around the world, play these amazing places, and have thousands of people singing back those old songs, is because they know it's for real.
Yeah.
It's not made for some kind of commercial, aspect or, some kind of entrepreneurial idea.
Yeah.
It's just music made for the sake of music.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop it there. Again, it sounds to me like I just have, my gut just tells me that there's conversation about this happening. No evidence to suggest that I am correct, but just the way that there's kind of a denial there. Maybe this is just me hoping in vain. I would definitely say, if it gets done, and it gets done where Seamoth and Ishan are writing in partnership, and it's not Ishan running the whole show, I think it's going to be something quite special if they put out something new, because just based purely on the strength of the 3 Wretched End albums, Ominous, Inroads, and In These Woods From These Mountains, especially In These Woods From These Mountains, Seamoth would add so much to Ishan, and I think would curb Ishan's more self-indulgent proclivities when it comes to songwriting, and I think we would end up with something fucking spectacular. So, by the way, just to give George at, what's this thing called? Metal, God fucking damn it, Metal Global, his props. That is a very good interview. It's well worth checking out. I'll post a link to it in the description to the podcast as well. There's a article here about Metallica's Kirk Hammett joined by Robert Trujillo. Don't really care about that, but I did want to comment. Metallica just announced their European tour dates for 2026, and once again are taking out on the road with them a bunch of either shit bands or bands that are long in the or almost as long in the tooth as they are, or just bands that don't need the exposure. Pantera is out with them again. Avatar is going out with them. I mean, Avatar is such a fucking load of shit. I mean, I can't remember who else it was. I know it's not anything that I liked. I just don't get it. I don't understand why why they don't see the sense in taking out Fugitive or Spirit World, or get the dudes from fucking Power Trip to get together back properly, get them out on another full run with them. But just get some bands out that are kind of dabbling in the same vein as Metallica, and get them to have them open. Do a proper passing down of the torch, the way that it was in the mid '80s and the early '90s, rather than this this business of taking bands out, as I said, who don't need the exposure. Oh, sorry. By the way, I've just found the article now. Gojira, who gives a fuck? And Knocked Loose. I mean, Knocked Loose isn't bad, but why would you have them at a Metallica show? Why would you have a band like Knocked Loose at what should be a thrash band when you could take out with you Midnight? I mean, the only reason I personally think, and again, I know I love and hate Metallica in equal measure on this podcast, but the only reason I think that those sorts of things don't happen is because they're scared of being shown up. At this point, I can't see why else that would happen. But yeah, so just a little side rant that I needed to get off my chest there. By the way, that might actually be a nice way to wrap up this particular episode of Into the Necrosphere. Fugitive just put out their new single about probably 3-4 days ago, and they feature, of course, amongst their ranks, Blake Ibanez of Power Trip. Let me cue that up and just give you guys a little taste of what that sounds like. So here's my question. As a self-respecting Metallica fan with healthy testosterone levels, who would you sooner see open for Metallica? Fugitive or Knocked Loose? Or would you rather be lectured about the climate by Joseph de Plantier Thunberg and his fucking shitty, overrated band Gojira? There is no question in my mind who I would rather listen to. Anyway, that is just about time for me to wrap things up, my friends. I want to say massive thank you to Patrik Jensen. Make sure you check out that new Haunted album that is coming out, and I'm just going to remind myself of the release date once again so that I don't fuck it up. The album, of course, is called Songs of Last Resort, comes out on May the 30th, 2025. Like I said at the beginning of the news rant, if you see me at Fortress, come say hello. Make sure I see your faces at those live podcasts with Necros, Horns, and Frank. I am going to be back in some way, shape, or form next week, so I might not be releasing a numbered episode, but you're going to see me somehow. And, what shape that's going to take, you'll just have to wait and see. But for right now, my friends, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you bad motherfuckers when I see you.
Resurrect,